On a cloudy autumn morning in Melbourne, Emma zipped up the backpack of her 10-year-old son, Max, an incredibly bright and charismatic child. Meanwhile, her husband, Tom, had barely returned from his business trip. He walked through the door with a weary smile, claiming he was exhausted from the long flight. Emma felt a pang of doubt in her chest, something that had been growing over the past few weeks. Tom had always been a loving father, but recently, he had grown distant, and his travel schedule had inexplicably become much busier. "Are you picking Max up from school today?" Emma asked as she set the breakfast table. Tom hesitated for a moment before answering, about that. "I don't think I can make it. I have an important meeting at the office." "You might have to do it." Emma hid her disappointment, but something felt off. Over the next few days, she noticed strange patterns. Late meetings became more frequent, and Tom began avoiding deep conversations. It was as if he was there, but his mind was elsewhere. A week later, while working from home, Emma received a message from her close friend, Lucy. "We need to talk. I saw something strange yesterday," the message read. They met at a cafe in the heart of the city. "I don't know how to tell you this, Emma, but I saw Tom last night at a restaurant, and he wasn't alone. He was with a woman. They looked really close." The ground seemed to fall away beneath Emma's feet. Despite the pain this revelation caused, she wasn't completely surprised. The growing distance, the poorly explained excuses, it all made sense now. In the days that followed, Emma struggled with the decision of whether or not to confront Tom. Before she did, however, she wanted to be certain. She decided to involve Max, who, despite his age, was exceptionally tech-savvy. Months earlier, Max had installed a tracking app on Tom's phone, mainly because Tom had lost his phone several times. Always the inquisitive child, Max helped his mother access the app to check where Tom was. "Look, Mum," Max said one afternoon after school. "Dad's in a place that doesn't look like his office." He pointed at the map, and Emma saw that Tom was in a residential area far from the city center. Later that evening, Emma waited for Tom to come home. When he walked through the door, exuding his usual confidence, Emma couldn't hold back any longer. "Tom, where were you this afternoon?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Tom froze for a second before offering another one of his weak excuses. "Oh, I had a last-minute meeting. You know how it is. Traffic was awful too, so I took a bit longer." Emma stared into his eyes, her anger rising. "I know you're lying." Tom's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" "I know, Tom. Max and I know exactly where you were today. There's no more hiding." For the first time, Tom's confident facade. "It wasn't supposed to get serious, Emma. It was just something that happened." Emma's world shattered. She wanted to scream, cry, but instead, she made a decision right then and there. "Get out of my house," she said, her voice steady. "If you've decided to start another life, go ahead. But you're not taking anything more from me." Tom tried to protest, but Emma was firm. He packed a few of his things and left, promising to come back to deal with the legal side of things. But as the days passed, Tom didn't return. Meanwhile, the household finances began to spiral out of control. Bills piled up, and Emma soon discovered that Tom had used their savings to buy a luxury car, all under her name. The loan for the car was in Emma's name, but Tom had taken the vehicle with him. Desperate, Emma sought legal advice, but the process would take time. That's when Max, always observant, came up with an idea. "Mum, the car is in your name, right? Why don't we just take it back?" Emma laughed at the naivety of her son. "It's not that simple, Max. But we can track it down. If we find it before Dad sells it, we can get it back." Intrigued by her son's resourcefulness, Emma decided to give it a try. They accessed the car's tracker, which, to their surprise, was still active. The location showed a hotel on the outskirts of Melbourne. Without hesitation, Emma and Max drove out to the location. When they arrived, they spotted the car parked outside. Emma walked into the hotel lobby and informed the receptionist that she needed to speak with the owner of the car, explaining that the car was registered in her name. The manager, sensing the gravity of the situation, cooperated. A few minutes later, Tom emerged, looking shocked and nervous to see Emma. "What are you doing here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "I'm here to take back what's mine," Emma replied firmly. "The car is in my name, Tom. You have no right to keep it." Tom hesitated for a moment, but seeing that Emma wasn't going to back down, he reluctantly handed over the keys. "Fine. Take it. I won't need it anymore anyway." As he walked away, Emma felt a sense of relief wash over her. There were still many battles ahead, the divorce, the financial recovery, the legal mess, but in that moment, she knew she had regained a small piece of control over her life. In the following months, Emma sold the car and used the money to stabilize her finances. With the support of her friends and the incredible strength of her son, she began to rebuild her life. Tom, on the other hand, struggled to maintain his new relationship, which fell apart shortly after. He returned to Melbourne, but Emma had already moved on. Max, now 11, became a symbol of maturity and resilience. Always by his mother's side, he helped her. One evening, Emma's phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom. "Can we talk? I think I made a mistake," the message read. Emma stared at the text for a long time before replying. "About what?" A lengthy silence followed before Tom responded. "About everything. I miss you. I miss Max," he wrote. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She had anticipated this moment, but now that it was here, she was unsure how to feel. A part of her wanted to forgive him, to welcome him back into their lives. But another part, a stronger part, knew that too much had transpired. Tom had made his choice, and she had made hers. "I don't think that's a good idea, Tom," she replied. Another long pause ensued. Finally, Tom wrote back, "I understand." Emma exhaled, feeling a weight lift off her chest. It wasn't easy, but she knew she had made the right decision. Tom wasn't the man she had married anymore. He had changed, and so had she. As the months passed, Emma and Max continued to move forward. They laughed more, and the house felt lighter without the tension Tom's presence had brought. Emma began to feel like herself again, and Max, despite everything, seemed happy. Just as Emma was starting to feel a sense of normalcy, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Tom's attorney, informing her of his request for joint custody of Max. Emma's hands trembled as she read the words. How could Tom do this now, after everything? He had barely been present in Max's life since their separation. The thought of joint custody felt like a betrayal. She knew she had to fight this. Max was her entire world, and she couldn't allow Tom to disrupt the stable life they had painstakingly built. But fighting Tom meant going to court, and Emma wasn't sure she had the strength for that battle. Later that evening, as she tucked Max into bed, he looked up at her with his large, brown eyes. "Is Dad coming back?" he asked softly. Emma hesitated, unsure how to respond. She didn't want to lie to Max, but she also didn't want to burden him with the truth. "I don't know," she finally said. "But whatever happens, we'll be okay. I promise." Max nodded, but Emma could see the worry reflected in his eyes. He was just a child, but he understood more than she wanted him to. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, hoping that her love would be enough to shield him from the approaching storm. After a few hours of rest, I woke up to find my parents standing by my bedside, their faces filled with concern and love. "How are you feeling?" my mother asked gently, brushing my hair back from my forehead. "Tired, but okay," I whispered. The weight of what had happened with David still hung over me, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of clarity. My father looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "Lisa, we need to talk about what's next." I knew what he meant. The events of the past few days had made it painfully clear that my marriage with David was over. His actions during the most important moment of my life, the birth of our child, had shown me his true character. "I know, Dad," I said quietly. "I've been thinking about it, too. I can't stay with him. Not after everything." My parents exchanged a look of understanding. "We'll support you, no matter what," my mother assured me. "You don't have to face this alone." The next day, as I rested in the hospital, my phone buzzed repeatedly with missed calls and messages from David. He had finally realized the gravity of the situation, but it was too late. I ignored the calls, focusing on my recovery and my new baby. Sarah visited again, bringing a basket of fresh fruit and a smile. "How are you feeling, Mum?" she asked playfully, and I couldn't help but laugh at the title. "I'm doing better, thanks to you," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. As we talked, Sarah revealed that she had told her husband, who happened to be David's boss, about what had happened. "He's furious," she said, shaking her head. "David's behavior wasn't just irresponsible, it was disgraceful." I hadn't expected the situation to escalate this far, but I couldn't deny a part of me felt a sense of justice. David's actions had consequences, and now he was facing them head-on. Facing the consequences, David's calls continued over the next few days, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. His messages ranged from desperate apologies to blaming me for his actions, but none of it mattered anymore. My focus was on my baby, my recovery, and the life I needed to rebuild without him. While I was still in the hospital, I received a call from Sarah's husband, Mark, who confirmed what Sarah had told me. "I'm sorry, Lisa. What David did is inexcusable, both as a husband and as an employee. We can't have someone like him representing the company." I was shocked but not surprised. David had shown a pattern of irresponsible behavior in our marriage, and now it was catching up to him in every part of his life. Mark informed me that David had been disciplined at work, which had caused him to spiral further into self-pity. His colleagues knew about what happened, and his reputation was in ruins. After I was discharged from the hospital, I moved in with my parents to focus on my recovery and to care for my baby. They had already set up a room for me, and it felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one where I was surrounded by love and support, far from David's toxicity. One evening, as I was feeding my baby, my mother came into the room, looking concerned. "David's parents called again," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "They don't understand why you're not speaking to him. They said they want you to go back to him." I sighed deeply. David's parents had always been difficult, and their constant pressure only made things worse. "I'm not going back." David's refusal to contribute financially to our child was another obstacle I had to overcome. "I don't see why I should pay for a child I won't see," he argued during one of our mediation sessions. His callous attitude towards our child was heartbreaking, but it only strengthened my resolve. He was not the man I thought I had married, and he was clearly unfit to be a father. Thankfully, my lawyer was unwavering in her commitment to protecting my rights. "If he refuses to cooperate, we'll take this to court," she stated firmly. Facing the prospect of a legal battle he couldn't win, David finally agreed to the terms of our divorce. It was a bittersweet victory, but it was what I needed to move forward. Once the divorce was finalized, a wave of relief washed over me. I was finally free from the toxic relationship that had drained me for so long. I could now focus entirely on my baby and the new life I was building with the support of my parents. Throughout this challenging time, Sarah remained a constant source of encouragement. Our friendship deepened, and her unwavering support gave me the strength I needed to navigate the difficulties ahead. She often reminded me, "You've been through so much, Lisa. You deserve happiness, and you'll find it." With the divorce behind me, I began to feel a sense of peace. David had lost his job due to his own actions, and his behavior had become public knowledge. His reputation was tarnished, and he struggled to maintain any semblance of the life he once had. He was forced to move back in with his parents, barely making ends meet with part-time work. Meanwhile, I found solace in the simple joys of motherhood. My baby was growing rapidly, and each day brought new milestones and moments of joy. I embraced this new chapter of my life with open arms, determined to provide my child with the love and security they deserved. Embracing a new life with the divorce behind me, my life slowly began to settle into a rhythm of peace and contentment. I moved forward, focusing on the future and leaving behind the bitterness of my marriage. My parents' home became a sanctuary, filled with warmth and laughter as we cared for my baby together. Every day, I watched my child grow stronger and more curious about the world, and I couldn't have been more grateful for the opportunity to start fresh. David's attempts to reconnect dwindled, especially after he realized my decision was unwavering. His once constant calls became occasional, half-hearted attempts, and eventually, they stopped altogether. He had lost everything: his job, his reputation, and now his family. But these were consequences of his own actions, and I no longer felt responsible for him. As time passed, I realized that my bond with Sarah and her family had deepened. She had been there for me in my darkest moments, offering support without hesitation. Her husband, Mark, remained furious at David for his actions, and Sarah's loyalty to me only grew stronger. We often spent time together, and our families became closely knit. One day, Sarah's son, James, came to visit her, and we started chatting more often. Initially, it was just small talk, but as time passed, our bond grew into something deeper. James possessed kindness, thoughtfulness, and a level of attentiveness that David had never displayed. He genuinely cared about my well-being and showered my baby with affection, which touched me deeply.